Good morning, everyone. This is Rama on Riding, coming to you live from a beautiful, soon-to-be sunny Kailua Kona, Hawaii. It's a little bit early here just yet, but I'm looking forward to getting out. I'm actually going to be driving to the other side of the island today. I haven't been there on that side for years, so it'll be a nice change. Today we have a wonderful guest. We have Bernadette, who's just become a #1 Amazon bestseller. And we had a few trials and tribulations along the way with her project. She had a lot of life going on in her world. And at times, we were wondering if we were going to make the deadline, but everything came together just in the nick of time. Bernadette, why don't you tell us who you are, why you wrote your book, and anything else just yet. If you start to flounder, I'll ask some questions to keep you going, okay?
Okay, that sounds good. Well, life happened, is what happened. So my book is called Fulfillment, The Power of Compassion. And it's a memoir of getting through life struggles, because a lot of life has happened to me in the last 5 years. The basis of my book is I was married for 23 years or 24 years, and my husband lost his job, and then he literally lost his mind, and I had to put him in a mental facility. And from all of this, it was like all these things kept happening. And it was like, how was I going to get through it? Because he was the main breadwinner. You know, I was a dental assistant. I didn't make that much money. We had 2 houses at the time, one in New Mexico that we had put on the market that hadn't sold, and the one in Tennessee where we lived. And there was so many things that just kept showing up. And it was like, things weren't bad enough. They ended up getting worse. And when I thought that it was the absolute worst, it got worse again. And it was like, I was just barely staying above water. And it was a very hard story to tell, but I believe that exposing the truth is critical for healing. So I told the truth in my story. All the names are correct. What I went through is correct. I've finally come to this point of realizing that you have to be vulnerable and you have to be willing to tell the truth. And you go to any AA meeting or anything, the first thing they tell you is get honest with yourself. So that's what I did. I got honest with myself and I told the truth, not only of his shortcomings, but of my own, because we all will make mistakes in life. We all will learn. That's part of life. And I think one of the main things that I learned is that when you have compassion for your own self, for your own pain, only then can you have compassion for somebody else. Because it's all about you seeing how precious you are and how loved you are. And, I love finding out about the magic in life. What makes things happen? And I used to listen to all the best speakers in the world. I was constantly reading books, anything from manifestation to metaphysics to, relationships, whatever it was. And as I read these books, it's like the same things kept coming up over and over and over. And I thought, I'm going to try this. And I'm just going to see if changing this one little thing will work for me. And I just started making these little changes one at a time. And I started finding that the loneliness that I was feeling inside finally started to drift away. And instead, I started getting to that place where I really loved myself, and I was so important that I would take care of me first before I would take care of anybody else. And what I learned about that is when you learn to love yourself first, when you learn to put yourself first, you fill yourself up with everything you need. And then you don't have to look for it outside of yourself. And that was my big aha moment. And these are just the little things, you know, living in the moment. I noticed that my mind was always going crazy. It was always thinking, what do I have to do? What didn't I do right? We're so critical with ourselves. We beat ourselves up constantly. And that's like the worst thing we can do. We focus on the one thing that went wrong instead of the 100 things that went right. And you know, this world is one of your thoughts create your reality, because that's the truth that you're living in at the time. So if you can learn to change your perception about how you see life, all of a sudden your life changes. So instead of focusing on the one thing that didn't go right, if you can focus on all the things that went right, then all of a sudden your life takes on a whole different role. So I think for me, I had to surrender to that suffering so that I could start finding my way to fulfillment. And that's really what happened. So,
Bernadette, did you always think that you would write a book? I mean, has this been something that you'd wanted to do? I know you told me about some of your kids' stories and things like that, and all. But you know, this book seems to have really transformed you. Had you always thought about writing?
Rama, I have to tell you, when I was younger, I hated reading books. I couldn't stand it because I couldn't understand the darn things. My mind was always so busy. Even when I was in school, all my friends would go through a chapter and it was good. I would have to read the darn thing 2 or 3 times, you know, because I wasn't focused. So I hated books. You could not make me read a book at all. And then when I think it was my youngest son was in junior high, getting close to high school, that's when the Aragon series came out and the Harry Potter series around that time. And he was doing really bad in school. And so I thought, you know, I had read someplace that, you know, reading would help a child. So I got this book and we started reading it. Well, before you knew it, we were in a competition because the book was really interesting. We were both reading this book. And, you know, he would pass me and then I would pass him. And, you know, all of a sudden he loved reading. And these books were so thick that after you read one, you just went and bought the other one and you could, you know, read that one. And all of a sudden I found a passion for reading. I mean, now I can read a book a day if I wanted to, because I love reading. I love researching. Everything that interests me, I read about. But basically, no, I never thought I would write a book. And here I am. And the only reason I wrote it was because, you know, I used to go to work and the girls at work with, you know, they knew what I had been through. And they would tell me, Berna, I don't know what you're on, but I want some of it. And I would think, what am I on? And I would say, I just love my life. Even though I had this crazy screwed up relationship happening at the time, I loved my life. Not the crazy part, but I just was happy all the time. And I said, you know what? One of these days, I'm going to put all of my life lessons into a book. And the reason I incorporated all of the bad stuff is so that people could see life happening and unfolding and me getting through it. And what I learned to do is when stuff happens, I don't attach myself to what's happening. I kind of see it as, okay, I'm going through this, and the only way to get through something is to go through it. But you don't have to attach yourself to every single little feeling. You know, because I always had the thought in the back of my mind, something better will show up. So I lived with that hope that once I got through this, it would be okay. And everything we go through, our good times and our bad times, both of those teach us something. And they're both equally as important. So what I came to realize is me going through my dark nights of the soul and, you know, having to take care of a husband who was kicked out of the mental facility and who got so dangerous I had a 5-year order of protection. All of these things taught me compassion. And I would do it all again to learn the lessons I learned, because they made me so powerful within myself. And that's, you know, something that when we get to that point where we can reframe our life story and see, because of this, I learned this. Mm-hmm. Because of this, I am now able to associate with somebody else and know what they go through. Sometimes the lessons we learn are for us and sometimes they're for other people. But either way, life is all about learning, gaining wisdom. So we each have our own wisdom and we can all share with each other. I kind of like to see the world as this beautiful tapestry, and each of us are a thread. And we all weave together, our lives are all intermixed. And at the end of time, we'll have this beautiful picture that all of us created, but we did it together. So.
You know, Bernadette, this is really a very enlightened approach to life that you've laid out. You know, I think far too often we do get attached to our, you know, our stuff, and then we dwell on it over and over again. And, you know, basically, why bother? And, you know, we can still transcend into the next moment. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's one lesson that all of us can hear over and over again and benefit from. Okay, well, you've before we started, you told me about some other possible books that you're thinking about. Can you tell that story again? That was such a wonderful little story. So let everyone hear it.
Okay. Well, when my children were growing up, they would always ask me to tell them a bedtime story before they went to bed. And I've got this great imagination. I've always been, you know, I've loved Star Trek, all of these, you know. I want to know how the magic in life happens. That's why I research everything. So I made up this little character. And he's a little boy, probably around the age of 6. And his grandfather, you know, he goes to visit his grandfather and they live in the woods. And his grandfather takes him out to the backyard to a real special place. And he gives him a key. And this key opens up the realm of imagination. And this is where all the magic happens. So the little boy, his name is Adam, or Brian, and his best friend is Adam. I used some of my children's names in there, and my grandson. And so this is his adventures. He's kind of like a 6-year-old MacGyver. And, you know, he can get himself out of any situation with these really ingenious things. And, you know, he always has this handy little backpack that he carries, you know, everything he needs. And that came from my children. You know, they used to tease me that I always had everything they needed to get out of any situation in my purse, because I was like always prepared, right? So I figured, okay, Great Brian's going to have this little backpack. And anything he needs is going to be in there. So, you know, he can fight the dragons and, you know, the witches and whatever it is that comes his way. So I used to keep them real interested in this story. And sometimes the story would end and sometimes it wouldn't. But the thing that made it interesting is my children would take part in the story. I would start it, and then they would continue with the story. And they could take it on any twist and turn they wanted to. Then I would take it back and make another situation come out of that. And it was just a fun, interactive way of dealing with stuff. So when I went to the Tom Bird writing retreat, after I had written my book, he says, you'll know if it's time, if this book is complete, if you can start your next one. And the next one just started flowing in. And sure enough, Brian showed up, and, his story had to be written. So I changed a few of the little things, throwing a little bit of truth of life. And when I went to visit my daughter and my grandson, I let my daughter read it, and she's like, Mom, this isn't the same story, you added stuff. And she says, nobody's going to like it. So that night, when I went to bed, my grandson comes and crawls in bed with me, and he says, Letha, he says, will you tell me a story? He says, A Brave Brian. And I thought, okay, let's see if he likes the story. So I told him the story that I had written. And as soon as I was done, he sat up in bed, looked straight at me, and he said, I loved it. Can we tell my mom? It was just like, she had hated it because I changed it. But she was so attached to the old. And, that's one of the things that I've come to learn is life is just about change. If you think you have any control in life, think again, because you can't even take your next breath by yourself. So, this was my story, and, that'll come up next, but first things first, this has been a rough year, and, writing this book, like I said, it came from everybody saying, how are you living this kind of a life with everything that's going on? And it had been some hard things to tell, but it just wasn't about my ex-husband. Before I went to the Tom Bird retreat, I had written part of my book, and my book had just stopped. And I didn't have writer's block, it just stopped. And I wondered why, and I was like, well, when this book is supposed to be written, it'll be written, because I'm very intuitive and I pay attention to all my clues in life. And then when the rest of the year, my mother got cancer and life happened. And when I went to the Tom Bird retreat, all of a sudden, the two things that had shown up within that last year came flowing out, because they were supposed to be part of this book. The tragedy with me learning about my son's experience with his father and my mother's illness had to be put in the book as well. So, this book is really powerful in getting through all the bad stuff. I had my dark night of the soul, and I had an experience that, I've had a couple of experiences in my life. When I was about 3 or 4, my grandfather, my mother's dad, passed away. And he visited me the night he died. He came in as a spirit through my window. He sat on my bed and he told me not to worry, that he had to go away for a while and I wouldn't see him, but he would always take care of me. And, anytime I went through a hard time, I would just remember him. And it's like things would get better. It was like I had the strength to get through it. And when I was having my dark night of the soul, with Ben, I had another experience. And all of that is in my book. But, I had to really, I know that there's more to this life than we can see. And I read about it all the time. I like reading all kinds of books, like In Tune with the Infinite, or, just these old books of wisdom, I guess you would call it, like Deepak Chopra and, some of these other ones that have these grains of wisdom that it's like, kind of like what we were talking about, not attaching ourselves. It's like surrendering to our greater good. That for me, the way I see life now is the energy of God permeates everything. And it lives in us. And so we are great creators because of that. But basically, he takes care of everything. And I just trust that all of that, all my life will be taken care of. But I can't attach myself too much to the situation that's happening. So.
Bernadette, what was the hardest part of this book writing process? It does sound like you had to revisit a number of things that may not have been the best tasting things that you've encountered, but you come through very, very clearly with why you did it. So what was the hardest part of it?
Well, like I said, getting honest with myself and really telling the truth, kind of like stepping back and looking at my story and not judging it. This was my story, but there's not a judgment of like I was bad or Ben was bad. It was just, this is the story. This is what happened. But I got really clear and I told the truth. Being that vulnerable is really scary because you're kind of like putting your dirt out there for the world to see. But it kind of tells people too, hey, look, nobody's perfect. And that's okay. That for me was hard, writing the story down. When I was writing the hard parts, I was just in tears. And, my boyfriend, he helped me proofread it. And every time he'd get to those parts, he would just come in and hug me and he'd be totally in tears. And I was like, what's wrong? He's like, I can't believe that I wasn't there to save you. And I was like, that wouldn't have been good because I was married at the time. I didn't know you. I said, I would have thought you were crazy. And, my dad told me the same thing when he read the book. And I even read it to my mother and she cried. So, this is out there, But it was hard writing those things down. But I just felt, I'm tired of things being hidden. For me, telling the truth is really important. So I just told the truth. And there's a lot of truth in that book that people are going to not know. They're going to be shocked. But it just is what it is. I don't know, one of my children, my oldest, basically disowned me because of the book. But, he didn't want his story to be told, but it was part of my story, so I had to be truthful.
There are a lot of books where we do, entangle our connections, our personal connections, and it's very brave of you to have approached it this way. I've had a lot of authors become shy about that. Well, do I change names? Do I change my name? Do I write under a pseudonym? And it seems like none of that was part of your experience. Did you think about that at any point in time? Did you think about changing names? Did you think about the repercussions? Did it make a difference?
Well, I thought about it when I had been to a couple of Hay House Writers Retreats, and they said you had to be very careful because you could get sued and everything. And I was like, this is my story from my recollection. And I asked my children if they wanted to write their story, to put it in the book, because what I've learned is everybody sees things differently. So, the life I thought my children were living was not the life they were living in their mind. But I did the best that I could, at the time, because I was running 4 businesses. And then at night, I would go out and take care of other children. And I would tell them the Brave Brian stories. And, you know, it was funny. We were talking about this, and the lady who ran the service called me, and she said, I have 30 people working for me. She says, everybody wants you. What do you do with these children? And I was like, I tell them stories, you know. And so I knew these kids loved the stories because everybody wanted me back. And, you know, so I said, in the future, this book will be told. But before I could get to that point, I had to heal myself. And me write, I kind of feel like when you write a memoir, you get all your gunk out. Because if you can really be honest with yourself and tell the truth, and worse, and expose it to the world, then you've got some serious healing going on, because you're not holding anything in. You're just letting yourself shine. It's like good, bad, different, it doesn't matter.
You know, I have noticed that for many of our authors, getting that first story out is important to clear the deck, empty the cup, whatever it is. When you finished the book, did you get that feeling that you had that you really had emptied the cup, that you had finally, you know, gotten that out, and now it was going to be easier to move on to the next step? It sounds like you're very good at moving on to the next step, regardless. But how did the book impact your feelings about that?
Well, I thought it was done until I realized there was an editing process. Because this was my first book. I mean, I've had several careers in my life. When I was young, I started out as a file clerk in a bank and ended up having my own branch office 6 years later. Then I had my own daycare. Then I had a window cleaning business, a cleaning service, a property management company, and I used to do the books for my brother's automobile repair shop. That's when I was really busy, and then babysitting. So, Rama, ask me that question again, because I just lost everything.
Well, you know what I was trying to get at is you know, listening to you, you know, it sounds like you have this way of life, okay, that you readily, you know, see that you change and that you go with that change pretty easily. And I was just trying to get to whether the book, whether you noticed the book help that process. Did it make it easier? Did you feel completion of you know, a step and ready to move into the next step a little easier, or something along those lines? I know it's a little ambiguous, the question I'm getting at, so you don't have to answer it if you can't.
Well, I did notice, like you said, I was ready to go on to the next book, and all of a sudden the editing showed up, and I was going, okay, so now I've got to, you know, kind of read through this, look at it. And a lot of new stuff showed up during the editing process. So I was surprised that things, you know, would be like, this has to be in the book. I would read a story and it was like, this story has to be in this book because it gives my point so well. So, I mean, as things would show up in the editing process, all of a sudden my book was a lot longer than what it had been. I know for a while we were struggling with, was I going to have enough pages to even have the spine? And all of a sudden things just showed up and I put them in there. And, you know, by the time my editing was over, you know, but it's almost like you were saying, one thing led to the next thing, led to the next thing. But it did help me to kind of feel my closure in that point and step into something else. And I mean, I'm still, for me, this book is still brand new. You know, it came out, you know, it was on Amazon just a month ago today.
Wow.
So it's still new, and I still only have 2 reviews up, so I don't know if anybody's read it or not. And I haven't gotten any feedback. I had one lady on Facebook said it was very powerful and inspirational, and thank you very much. But, I would love if people would go and give me reviews on Amazon, because that would help. I really want to know how I'm impacting the world, if I am.
Sounds good. Now, you and I know some of the issues we dealt with in the publishing timeline. But what to you was the hardest part of publishing? You've talked about writing it and not realizing that there was editing and other things. So what was the hardest, most frustrating part of the publishing timeline for you?
Okay, well, when you're doing all of this, not only were we trying to get our books out, but we were part of the beta group, which Tom was giving us homework. And at the same time, we're trying to set up our websites. I was working with Denise on the Amazon bestseller. I was working with Jody. I was working with Greg. I was working with David. I was, all of these things at the same time, plus the homework. And somehow I got put on a pre-order status. And with a pre-order status, you have to have your book before everybody else, because you have to have it in there 2 weeks before so that they can send it out to anybody who's pre-ordered it. And that caused us a lot of problems. So that was one thing that was difficult to deal with, because we just barely came down to the line. The day it was the cutoff was the day we got it in. And then we had some problems with the book cover. I was really determined to have this book using the corals and the purples, because the color of compassion is coral and the color of fulfillment is the indigo. And I really wanted these 2 colors in my book. And the first picture that I had sent didn't get sent in because we sent so many pictures. So they used the second picture and it was too dark. So then Tom said, let them create a cover. And the one thing I specifically remember saying was, I didn't like the first cover. It was too gray. I want it more coral. And the cover creation decided to go with all gray for the second cover. And it didn't work. It didn't have any life to it. To me, fulfillment and compassion are about life. They're about, being joyful and serene and finding your center within yourself. And so then finally, me and my little sister found the picture we wanted to work with, and we fixed everything up. And that's the one I ended up sending you that turned out to be my book cover, which was the coral and the indigo. So we had a lot of challenges.
Now, Bernadette, did you write in the book about the coral and the indigo, or not? Or is that a blog posting yet to be done, or is it a blog posting that has already been done?
No, I wanted to write a blog on it. I really did. And because here's the thing I've learned about life. I like to listen to all these speakers. And one of them is a psychic medium who teaches us kind of how to see all of our clues in life. If you have certain numbers showing up, colors, if a song gets stuck in your head, all of these kind of have messages for us. And like I said, I love researching everything. So I've researched numbers and colors. And, I just thought it was very interesting that these words had a color associated with them. Fulfillment is more, it's like your indigo is your connection with God chakra. And, that's what fulfillment is. You finally get to that place of peace and, you're happy. Coral is your red and yellow. Red is your passion, yellow is joy. And, when you are compassionate with somebody, that's your coral. And I really love that. So it was real important that my book have these colors.
What's your feeling about how social media enters into this process? Do you like social media? Do you use social media? Are you frustrated by it? What's your insight?
I love Twitter, and I think that's going to kind of be my thing. But I was overwhelmed, and like I said, this is all a brand new process for me. So being an author means you need to be out there connecting with people, and there's just a lot to know. I have my author Facebook page under Bernadette Romero author. I have my Twitter under B Romero author. And if they go to my website, BernadetteRomero.com, they can connect with me on all of my social media. They can read my blogs, just anything interesting. On that same page, I have other authors who have launched their books under guest authors, so they can go there and, connect with other authors as well. So there's a lot on my webpage. But social media, it's important, but it can become overwhelming. And I think with all of us, what we have to do is pick our niche and work on it. Whatever it is you love, you always have to be doing what you love. So I like Twitter, so I'll keep working on Twitter, and I'll still use my Facebook and other things, but I think that's my thing for now.
I think that tends to happen a lot is that, we kind of find one of the social medias that seem to feel better for whatever reason, and we concentrate more of our effort there. Has there been any reward from playing with your social media, other than, just knowing that you have to do it, but any feedback coming back to you that has shown you that, hey, this has got more potential than I initially thought?
Well, I've connected with some people. So, you get messages, you can get messages on Twitter as well. So there was one person who was real excited to get my book. They knew it was going to be amazing just because they had seen the cover. There was another, because there was so much mental illness, part of my Amazon bestseller status on dissociative services that hit #1 had to do with mental illness because of Ben's dissociative disorder. And the other one was in spiritual gifts that I hit #1 in that one. So, it's great connecting with people. And as time goes on, I'll see how it impacts me a little bit more. But I love that. I love that I can inspire the world with just a few words.
Sounds good. Bernadette, I'm going to open up the forum at this point to any questions or comments. So most of you all know how to unmute yourself. If you don't, you can wave at me and I'll unmute you. So does anyone have any questions or comments for Bernadette at this point?
I do.
Okay, Leah, go.
Bernadette, I love hearing you talk, and I really resonate with the sort of non-emotional attachment to things so that they move forward. That's something I believe in too. So I had a couple questions. The first one is probably just a pretty basic yes or no, but the pre-order, did that result in any sales?
Actually, I think the link might have not been up on time because some of the people told me that they pre-ordered it, had to call Amazon again. So, like I said, it was my first time doing this, and I don't know how that happened, but in reality, I should have had more pre-orders than I did. I think I only had like 3, but it still was fine.
The other thing is I was kind of wondering if you're considering moving into children's books. It sounds like that's, okay, so there's sort of 2 parts to this question, and then I'll mute myself. I was wondering if you thought about moving into children's books and if you actually ever thought about doing the artwork for them. And then my second question is, what's your plan? What's your next project?
Well, I've already started writing my Brave Brian story. That's the next book that'll be showing up. Unless Spirit says something else, and then it'll change. I never know what my day is going to hold, but it's already halfway written, and that was a story that I told my grandson, and that's a story that I'm working on. So it would be a children's book, because I would love to do a series of this little MacGyver guy.
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like it could be a series. Have you ever thought about like creating the art, or maybe having the kids you work with, maybe putting some art together that you could incorporate into the book?
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's something I can think about. I mean, I'm great at landscapes, but I don't know if you want me drawing people.
Yeah.
You might have a lot of little stick figures all over the place.
Do you think you'll write some more of the nonfiction, like self-help spiritual books as well, or do you think you might do both?
I think I might do both. We'll just see what shows up. I just kind of go with my heart and what inspires me. That's how I've always lived my life. So I never know where it's going to change or how it's going to go, but we'll see. I've kind of learned to live in that state of every day is a new adventure. Mm-hmm. So let's see what happens.
Thanks for sharing with us. You're really, really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or comment at this point? Dawn.
Yes, I'd love to say thank you. For lots of things, your imagination. And I love that whole notion of not being able to get through a chapter till you've read it 2 or 3 times. Because that's a reality for so many people. And, and then kind of what transpired for you with reading. I mean, that, I've worked with children a lot, and that whole notion of reading something you love really does transform that love, doesn't it, of reading. Yeah. And the vulnerability in your writing, I think that point of speaking our truth it's certainly something I grapple with in terms of not 80% truth, but 100% truth. And it is not easy. And you've really stepped into that. You've stepped into that, willing to take the consequences, and kind of the, what that's produced from probably lots of different offshoots. Children's stories are fabulous. I think there's always room for new children's books. So write that. Mm-hmm. My question is whether you've thought of taking the book you have written and doing some speaking about it.
I would love to do that. I just really think that it would give people permission to tell their story.
Yeah.
And to really be vulnerable and tell the truth. Because that's the core of all healing, is being able to be honest with yourself. And you don't judge yourself, because we all have shortcomings. We're all going to make mistakes. That's part of life. Yeah. But to know that somebody else was willing to tell their truth, it kind of like gives people permission. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would really encourage you to find places in person, because I think, we're listening to you. We're listening to you, not just reading the book. And hearing you talk about this has a whole different impact.
Right.
Along with reading words, but really hearing you talk about it has a beautiful impact. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. And we all can't write reviews, I guess, right, Rama? They don't allow...
It's a frustration. There's got to be a way of cracking the system, and I think Bernadette and I talked about this. That her significant other has an account on a Kindle as well, and so she kind of uses that to provide the reviews. But there is a big problem with Amazon. They somehow don't want friends to write reviews, and I'm not sure if that's really a wonderful thing, because I mean, our friends do it, but we need help somehow or another. So anyway, I'm not sure what the answer is there.
Rama, I have something that came in, that if the people that we are not friends with on Facebook, for some reason, I think they're monitoring Facebook. Social media, Twitter, and those other things, not so much. But if people like in your other writing groups could write for the or could do reviews for the first beta group, and the first beta group could do reviews for them. Because like Leah and Dawn, they're not part of my social group. So they could go on Amazon and do reviews for me, and I could do reviews for them, but because they're not part of my group. So, it's all good. We can still try. I do the same thing on my iPhone. When I read the book, I still do a review on Amazon, and I do a review on Goodreads. So and what we came up with at our last book meeting group is, we thought, why don't we send each other our reviews through email, and then we can post it on Amazon, and we can post it on our author page. So we'll still have the reviews up there. They're just not Amazon reviews. So anybody going to our pages will still see what our friends had to say.
And you can also post them on social media as well as your own website. And one of the things that I do want to say is that it is very easy to add a front page of the book that has reviews and testimonials, okay? I mean, I can do that for the authors. I can't add anything in the middle of a book, but as a front or the back, that's actually fairly simple to do. So that's another way that we can take advantage of these testimonials and reviews. We may need to cut them down to just a sentence or two, because otherwise people probably won't read them at the front of a book. But another possibility. Anyone else with a question or comment for today? Well, Bernadette, you've been delightful. I really enjoyed your interview. I was nodding my head quite a bit, and you hit on a lot of really, really good topics. And I think that some of those topics you also have mentioned that in your Brave Brian stories, you're kind of leaning that way also. I would encourage you, because those values that you're talking about are really, really important. And if we learn them young, we're going to be much more successful in life. So keep up the good work. And
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write these, because I think if I can empower children when they're young to know that how they think will empower their world, then I think we're going to have a lot better children growing up very powerful in their own sense, because they'll find their happiness within themselves and not be looking for approval outside of themselves, which is, if all of us could learn that, we'd all be good. Thank you, Rama. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, thank you. Bernadette, before you go, why don't you give your website address and your email address in case anyone wants to contact you.
If you go to BernadetteRomero.com, you can connect with me there on my email. Just contact the author. And you can also connect with me there on all my social media. And there's a link to my Amazon book as well. So everything is on my webpage. The name of my book, again, is Fulfillment, The Power of Compassion. And I wish I had a picture of my book.
Hold on a second. That's if it wasn't so early in the morning, I probably would have had that. Let me put the cover up real quick, Bernadette. And Bernadette, do me a favor and send me an email as a reminder so that we can get the titling a little clearer for you. You had mentioned it to me, and it's been on my mind, but I need a reminder. I'm just, got so much stuff going.
Yes, and we had created the title, me and my sister, with the wording, so as it got blown up, it got a little bit fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
But being that I'm okay with making mistakes in life now and not having everything perfect, then, if my title's not perfect, it just goes to show it could be okay.
Okay, here's her cover. Well, it's something that I want to use as an example for our cover team also. I don't want that to happen again. I don't think that they need to take shortcuts. We pay them good for what they do, and I don't want that ever again to happen. So I want to use you as an example to make a point. There's Bernadette's cover. It is a very, very peaceful cover. Fulfillment is a wonderful word, and in my F words of mountain biking, I'm going to end with fulfillment. So,
Thumbs up. Say thumbs up, Rama.
Everyone, remember next week we're not going to have a Rama on riding, and I don't believe I'm going to do the other webinars during the week either. I'm going to take the week off. Take care, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye. Thank you.